Hello and welcome to another episode of the Now Showing podcast, where I look at new releases that are coming out this week in theaters. And first up for me is Jesus Revolution. John and Andrew Irwin have spent the past few years delivering inspirational faith based films. Their canon so far includes films like Woodlawn, I Still Believe, I Can Only Imagine. And in 2021, they gave us American Underdog, which told the story of Kurt Warner and was one of my favorite films of the year. Now they're back with Jesus Revolution. This is another true story, but this might be their most overtly message driven film they've ever done. It takes us back to California in the late 60s, where Time magazine poses the question, is God dead? For Chuck Smith, played by Kelsey Grammer, that's an apt question in a nearly empty church full of older congregants. It's also fodder for a sermon, but his daughter comes across a hippie street preacher named Lonnie Frisbee, played by Jonathan Romy. She brings him home, and at first, while he's taken back, Chuck listens to Lonnie and his story, and he can't help but be moved by the man's faith and passion. He's also inspired to reach out to others who, like Lonnie, were looking for truth and love that is only found in scripture. Meanwhile, Greg Laurie, played here by Joel Courtney, was also looking for meaning and direction, but after trying to find it in a number of places and coming up short, he stumbles across Lonnie, which leads him to what he's looking for most, which happens to be God. Together, Greg, Chuck, and Lonnie become part of a movement that changes the world and inspires Time magazine in the early 70s to dub it the Jesus Revolution. There are parts of this movie that really worked for me. I was particularly drawn to the first hour and the movement as it's being built, the idea of reaching out to people, not judging people by their cover, and trying to help seek and save the lost. The early scenes with Grammer and Romy were particularly engaging, but as the film turns a corner, it feels like the story turns more cliche. This is based in part on a book from Greg Laurie, and he's supposed to be at the center of the story, but for large swaths of the production, his story in the film feels like the least engaging part, especially the love story. In real life, I think it's very inspiring. He and his wife have been together, as it notes at the end, for over 50 years, but on screen, it lacked some pop compared to what was going on in the rest of the film. The bones of something emotional and compelling are here. As noted, I've enjoyed some Irwin Brothers productions in the past. This one is directed by John alongside Brent McCorkle, while Andrew is a producer. I was also deeply moved by some of the theological ideas here, but that's something I love to see explored in film. But this didn't quite cross the finish line as I would have hoped. So I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. It opens in theaters today, so you can go and check this one out. Next up on the list is the new Netflix comedy, We Have a Ghost. This one comes from Christopher Landon, who is the writer-director behind Freaky and Happy Death Day. If you're looking at this, a cast that includes Anthony Mackie, David Harbour, Jennifer Coolidge, among others, it's a premise that seems like it would be ripe for laughs. And there are laughs at times, but this is more of a mystery and a drama, I think, than what you might be expecting. It's a story of fathers and children learning to appreciate what we've been given. And it's something that's a little bit different based on a short story from Jeff Manoff. It doesn't have the same tone or the same style as some of Landon's other films. Here, we focus on a family that moves into a fixer-upper with a past. Kevin, Jai Diallo Winston, isn't pleased to be moving again. He's also got a rocky relationship with his father, played by Anthony Mackie. His father is a schemer and dreamer, always looking for the next big thing. Kevin isn't really adjusting to his new surroundings, but when he stumbles upon a ghost named Ernest, played by David Harbour, that's living in their attic, it opens him up. When his family catches wind, especially his father Frank, he sees this as a way to make some money and get some exposure. Ernest is trapped with no memory and no means of really communicating except for writing and making a few sounds. He's not able to talk. But Kevin takes it upon himself, along with a new friend and neighbor named Joy, played by Isabella Russo, to figure out what happened to Ernest. Since his presence also draws the attention of the government, namely Dr. Leslie Monroe, played by Tig Notaro, there is a ticking clock for Kevin and Joy. As I mentioned, the expectation here would be some laughs, and there are some fun sequences, especially in the early going. Coolidge has a fun supporting role here, really only appearing in one sequence, but it was a humorous sequence. And that was part of the fun in really the first hour of the film. This is a film that goes a little over 2 hours, so it feels a little bit overly long. And that second half is much more serious and emotional, turns into much more of a mystery, less of a slasher comedy than his other work. I appreciated David Harbour here. He has to do a lot with facial expressions and actions since he's limited in dialogue. He shines, and so too does Winston. I love the dynamic between Kevin and Ernest. That was probably the best part of the film for me. In the end, as I mentioned, the runtime feels a little bit too long. And without much in the way of laughs, it felt a little dry at times. Mackie has an interesting arc, especially at the end. I did like the father child dynamic for both Frank and Ernest as they play that out in the resolution of the film. I enjoyed it, but I thought it fell a little bit short of its potential. I gave it 2.5 stars out of 5. And again, that one began streaming on Netflix this morning, so you can go and check it out. That's going to wrap it up for me today. But Eric and I will be back on Sunday looking at perhaps the biggest release of the week, which is Cocaine Bear, that opened in theaters today. So you'll want to check that out. We will be going live at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday night, and we'll also be looking at a couple of other classic Animal Caper films. So you won't want to miss that. Until then, I'll see you later.